subject had no bread. Do you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
Here, take the bomb.
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. It's the little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies, you see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people. Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of the Peasants Perspective. I love it when people get in during the intro. It makes us feel like we're going to start with an audience. It's kind of fun. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood, says Fraser. Cooler than yesterday, but Idaho is now officially in a drought. I got news for you. You've been in a drought since the day we moved there, Dad. It's been a long time. Carlito and Tiffany, good morning, y'all. Pray the Rosary Daily. Happy Wednesday from sunny Southern California. Carlitos from Texas, good morning. Pony Boy from Texas as well, good morning. Carlitos, Bitcoin is holding around 80,000. I woke up this morning and it dipped down into the 79s and I was like, geez. But yeah, it's rallied right back up. Of course it does that. I was looking at yesterday's chart and boop, boop, it's got a nice little V curve in it from time to time. It's a good time to buy, good time to buy. You know, it's funny. I've been in Bitcoin for a couple months now. Yeah. And my cost basis is $10,000 less than where it's currently at. So it's like, I can survive the volatility. That's the thing. If you hold for a little bit of time, you end up getting high enough because it holds floors. It's, you know, it kind of acts like stock. Now, it could dip down to $30,000 tomorrow, in which case I'll be going through the couch cushions looking for quarters to buy Bitcoin. But either way, it is a extremely precious commodity. John Atakis, it's a morning and good on YouTube. Mata Easel, good morning, you two. Thank you. Just Me, Pacific Northwest, happy Wednesday. Holy smokes, you guys are piling in. I love it so much. I'm glad to have every single one of you here tonight. The only person we're missing from the normal crew, well, maybe not the only person. There's more than just that. We've got Sarah Singh's, Shantini's missing.
They're just the ones that are top of mind.
Huh?
It's just your top of mind.
It's just my top of mind. Yeah. Doug Wyatt, you haven't chimed in yet, but I'm sure you guys will. You know what's nice is we don't have to pimp for chats anymore, Ron.
Yeah.
Yep. Get enough as over the first week or so to make sure we don't have to pimp for chats. We are, however, going to have to read some ads throughout the show because our revenue dropped quite a bit last month because we didn't read any ads. So apparently those little quarters that they throw at us to read, you know, Rumble Wallet ads and whatnot, they add up over the course of a month.
I hope you like coffee or something.
Yeah, I hope you guys like 1775 coffee because we're throwing it at you. We might even order some. It'll be kind of fun. All right, so I know why you guys show up bright and early, Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to whenever we're done. Monday through Friday, I already said that, Pacific Standard Time. You're here for the simultaneous sip. Pray the Rosary Daily says, Bitcoin, I'm on a daily buy and in it for the long haul, so I'm okay with the dips. That is the best part.
Yes.
You buy the dips when you buy daily. You also buy the peaks, but, you know, it balances out. All right, you are here for the simultaneous sip, and all you need is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, a chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. I already had a cup this morning. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better, the simultaneous sip, and it starts right now. We're going to double up on that simultaneous sip. You know, it takes a second for me to get all the things done when Ron walks in the door here. I got to change the sound over. All right, we're back. We're going to do the simultaneous sip again, and it starts right now.
I have a joke for you.
Okay.
The government is excellent and uses your tax dollars efficiently.
We haven't heard from Ron Swanson for a couple of weeks. All right, guys, big news today. Donald Trump touched down in China. I don't know, late last night, early this morning. I don't know. They're on the other side of the world. It's a totally different time zone. Not even sure how many time zones away they are. And when he arrived, they literally rolled out the red carpet. Look at that. Donald Trump walking down the red carpet. They got the Chinese youth and lock sync. I bet they practiced that a whole ton.
Yeah,
arms low, arms high, arms low, arms high, arms low, arms high. And there's Donald Trump walking out with the delegation. He's got a whole bunch of people with him today. And, you know, it's so funny. There's Monica Crowley there. I believe that's Eric Trump in the background, but I can't quite tell. Is that Eric Trump? Is that the same as taking Hunter Biden Jr. to China? I'm not sure. There's Elon Musk, Laura Trump. Let's see. You know, the interesting thing is those guys actually do have a role. So they're not just there for, bribes. I assume. I don't know. Let's hope. So yesterday, CNBC reported they had a hot scoop that the CEO of NVIDIA did not make it to China.
Oh.
Now, why this matters is Donald Trump took a whole cadre of people with him. And of course, CNBC, famous legacy news, they've got the scoop on everything. Turns out Trump played him. CNBC incorrectly reported that the great Jensen Huang of NVIDIA was not invited to the incredible gathering of the world's greatest businessmen and women proudly going to China. In actuality, Jensen is currently on Air Force One. Their scoop sucks. And unless I ask him to leave, which is highly unlikely, CNBC's reporting is incorrect, or as they say in politics, fake news. It is an honor to have Jensen, Elon, Tim Apple, Larry Fink, Steven Schwartzman, Kelly Ortberg from Boeing, Brian Sykes from Cargill, Jane Fraser from Citi, Larry Culp from GE Aerospace, David Solomon from Goldman Sachs, Sanjay Mehrotra from Micron, Cristiano Almond from Qualcomm, and many others journeying to the great country of China, where I will be asking President Xi, a leader of extraordinary distinction, to open up China so that these brilliant people can work their magic and help bring the People's Republic to an even higher level. In fact, I promise that when we are together, which will be in a matter of hours, I will make that my very first request. I have never seen or heard any idea that would be more beneficial to our incredible countries. Donald J. Trump. That's fun. So George Bush Sr. opened up us to China, or Nixon as well, us up to China, but nobody ever thought to open China up to us. So it's nice that Donald Trump is making a play there. Now, Bill O'Reilly from We'll Do It Live fame, he was on with Chris Cuomo on News Nation, and he has a little inside scoop. Apparently, he talked to somebody from China. He talked to a Chinaman, Ron. He talked to a Chinaman, and he thinks he knows what the negotiations are going to center around this next 2 days.
Oh, that's
interesting.
Oh, is that you?
That was me.
I'm here, and I'm not really interested in the trivia of this. I did talk to the Chinese today. Your producer should have informed you of that at noon Eastern
What did the
time.
Chinese say to you?
So I have some pretty good information. So
got anywhere from 500 million to 1.5 billion Chinamen that he could talk to get this information. Doesn't say who.
But one, there will be discussions about China helping the United States with Iran to tamp Iran down. That's number one. But in return, the Chinese are going to want something, and that will center around Taiwan. Not a handover or anything like that, but maybe the beginning of a discussion about Taiwan.
Do you like that trade?
Yeah, I think it's good for us. 2049 is the 100th anniversary of the evil Mao Zedong's takeover of China. And they being the Politburo, want the Chinese flag flying over that island nation. Now, whether that happens or not, who knows? It's a long way out. But there's room for discussion about a number of things with Taiwan. And the Chinese at this point are just trying to get into the room.
Do you think we're going to give up Taiwan? It's day. I know quite a few Chinese people that will not be happy about that.
Oh, yeah.
There's a working theory that I think we in the West have, and that's this idea that if you can open up China, like literally expose them to fair markets and, give the people real working wages that are not based on just production and slave labor, that they would liberalize and that they would revolt against the Chinese Communist Party as a governing system. I actually tend to think that is true. I tend to think that, China is a lot farther along than they were 30, 40 years ago during the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
They do have a constituency they have to deal with. And so I think it's possible. I think it's possible that they could liberalize. And so it'll be really interesting. I think Donald Trump has a big game plan. And again, this all incorporates raising price of energy, right? Getting them off the dole of Venezuela and Iran for free energy, cheap energy, making them pay market prices. opening up their country to Western businesses to sell things, not make things, but to sell things. So when Trump takes his whole cadre of tech people over there, he's basically saying, listen, we're going to run the tech world. You guys can use our systems, but these are all American-based companies. No Huawei exporting their stuff. It's going to be Apple and Microsoft and HP exporting their stuff there with American safeguards built in. That could be a really good thing. It could, of course, turn around and bite us in the butt. But in 2049 is their 100-year anniversary, and they would like to reunite with Taiwan. There are people in Taiwan who would like to reunite. There could be benefit there. Donald Trump, the one thing that keeps Taiwan absolutely critical for the United States is chip manufacturing.
Oh, absolutely.
But since COVID and since Donald Trump's return in his first term, he's made huge investments in NVIDIA, Apple, which basically shifted their production down to India instead of the United States like they were supposed to. NVIDIA, Elon Musk in XAI are building chips here in the United States. They're building their own chips. Intel made a huge capital investment into Intel via grants that got converted to stock, which America's done very well on. So if we can build and develop chips domestically, that reduces our reliance and reason to be constantly protecting China.
Absolutely.
So it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. I'm on the fence. I think it would be nice to see China liberalize. I don't know that the CCP is capable of liberalization, but I also know that the CCP is drastically outnumbered from normal people. And so, it'll be interesting to see how they look at that.
On this topic, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that some of the chips that are made in Taiwan are really, that's the only place they can really make them because they've specialized so hard. And, we are ramping up chip production here in the U.S., but we're a little bit still behind.
Well, they've got something in the water there that makes them they say it's less of a technology and more of an art form. Oh, and so they literally have generational chip making internships and stuff like that create these chips. It's not like an instruction manual written down on how to do it.
That's what I'm saying. And it's not like we can just turn it on and we're going to compete with them instantly. It's going to take a little bit to catch up.
Now, I have read some stuff in the past about AI and chip engineering and how that basically makes it so that we can achieve the efficiency and effectiveness of Taiwan chip making, that we are able to replicate that. So we'll see.
Cool.
We'll see. Another interesting thing about that is what Bill O'Reilly says about getting help in Taiwan. Wouldn't it be interesting if China put boots on the ground in Iran? Wouldn't that be a way to build a wedge between the red-green alliance that we see, right? If we actually go fight the guys that they've been having fund the
Are you bringing this up because it's a possibility?
I think it's a possibility.
Whoa.
Yeah, China has a lot more invested in Iran than not. And I could see Trump being like, you want to see if your military is really up for might?
Whoa.
Go city to city. Go Fallujah, Iran. Let's see how you do there. Okay? Another thing Donald Trump posted yesterday is this meme that I put up on the board here. And this is a serious idea. Venezuela as the 51st state.
Whoa.
How crazy would that be? And if we made Cuba the 52nd, both of those states will vote Republican for like 100 years. They're not going to be voting for anything that smells or looks like communism anytime soon. That could be really interesting. That is a serious consideration, by the way. Serious people are talking about it. Donald Trump posted up there like it's a meme, and maybe it is, but I tend to think it could be taken seriously. On the scene of ludicrous and absolute insanity, here is a throwback just to remind people why it is 1776 happened. There was a point in time where people who dressed up in cosplay like this actually ruled the day. And this is the King of England, long live the king, I guess, dressed up like an absolute king, wearing all of his bling. You think walking through Compton with a bunch of black guys wearing chains and gold rings and gold teeth is something? I remember in prison, a lot of the black guys had teeth implants with like diamonds and grills, but they were like actually embedded in their teeth. I'm like, what dentist went to school and thought, I'm going to make my living embedding cubic zirconiums in black dudes' teeth? Right? There was quite a few of these guys that had grills going on that were permanent. Like the prison would take them if they were just little bite-in inserts. These were actually like cubic zirconiums embedded in their teeth, Ron. And I'm surprised the king has not done this himself. But he's rolling out a new initiative, something that the Europeans and the socialists have wanted for a long time.
My ministers will also proceed with the introduction of digital ID that will modernize how citizens interact with public services.
He said citizens. I think he meant subjects. I think he meant subjects. So digital ID sounds like in England is going to be rolled out. There's a good side and a bad side to that, mostly a bad side. So Jared Wise, who was a January 6th defendant attorney who went and worked inside of this Trump's White House and the DOJ, recently quit because he said the corruption is so deep you can't change it from within. Best thing to do is get on the outside and whistleblow. And he said this about the terrorism watch list. I was on this terrorism watch list. I missed a flight one time because of the screening process I had to go through. And every flight I took during that 4-year period, I had the SSS designation on my boarding pass, which meant they had to close down security. I got my own little walk-through security, which took 5 times longer than if I had waited in the line. And of course, the line got bigger because I sucked up half of the security. They would literally close like the screening x-ray junk on both sides of whatever aisle they took me to. It was like a big deal. And then I would get to the terminal, and I had an air marshal assigned to me the whole time.
They just wanted to let you know that you were special.
Well, it was insanity. The terrorism watch list, or SSS boarding pass harassment, continues today for J6 defendants. Now, they got rid of the Quiet Skies program, which means it's not as overt, but they'll still stick an air marshal on you, still do extra screening. I've gone through the airport, and my experience was so bad before that even if they did extra screening on me, I wouldn't notice. Okay? Even if they paid extra attention, I wouldn't notice, because before it was like I'd show up at the gate and I'd have 9, 10, 12 agents there. They would have to check everybody's ID getting on the plane, randomly search people's bags, and of course, search my bag for the second time. So despite President Trump order to pardon, commute sentences and drop charges for all defendants, there are no changes today in the TSA airport screening process following the executive order on Monday. This was back in January 2025. Now, this has changed. The blanket inclusion of J6 defendants on the Terrorism Screening Center terrorism watch list is one of the greatest civil rights abuses to come from that day, and it continues. The process of adding people to the list is one-sided, meaning there is no opportunity for a person to argue against inclusion. Adding someone is solely up to the number of government officials who seek it, and there is no opportunity to appeal it once on the list. The entire process is arbitrary and controlled exclusively by the government. This would be a great opportunity for civil rights organizations from the left and right, ACLU specifically, to join together and end the abuses of this program. And then this right here comes from Martin. He was another January 6er. And I was aware of this. I never got to see a screenshot or anything like this. But this is what would happen when we would get pulled over by local police. It's crazy what officers see on their computer when they run our plates and or our license. Warning, approach with caution. Do not detain or arrest this individual based on this notice. Do not advise this individual that they may be of interest for ties to transnational organized crime.
What?
Mike, possible, MKE, possible national security threat. Caution. Then he posts, no joke, I copied and pasted it from the screenshot. I have all of it. This is definitely due to J6 because otherwise I'm a pretty boring person. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff they put us through there. Ponyboy says Dems want red district states and Trump wants Dems want to redistrict states and Trump want to redistrict counties. Countries. One's playing tic-tac-toe, the other's playing chess. Yeah, I agree with that. So along with the digital ideas that are being introduced in Europe, and of course in our country, we already have the Real ID program, which is the digital ID. And Thomas Massey, dude, that guy, the scandal that erupted yesterday, you guys got to hear it bright and early in the morning. Axios ran a story on it. He never responded to it. In fact, they started muting people who commented on any of his posts about Cynthia Wood. And she's been on him for like over a year. If you go follow her and see when she started posting, like she called him out like a year ago. When he started doing the Epstein thing, she's like, oh, you know, you get to call out other degenerates, but don't hold the mirror up to your face and all that kind of stuff. Pretty fascinating. Ooh. So I think he's more likely than ever to lose his primary next week. Mm-hmm. More likely than ever. So this is a semi-lefty. I don't know how far left, but this is a lefty. And yesterday, the White House put up a new guideline for counterterrorism. Now, one of the things that quite frankly said to me when I went on his show a couple months ago, with regards to ICE was, I agree with their current mission, but I worry about the tools that we're giving them. When I spoke at the Republican women's meeting in Kitsap County on Monday, one of the things I said was any power we give to government, they will use against us. This is just the nature of government. So we're going to listen to her breakdown here, and I'm going to speed it up just a little bit because it's a little longer. So for those of you that already listened a little bit fast, that's why. But she's going to go through this new counterterrorism list. And again, I agree with the current stated mission, but I also am extremely cognizant of the power that's being handed over to law enforcement agencies to accomplish this.
Here's what you missed today, May 11th, 2026, while you were doom scrolling through creator after creator, reacting to the fact that Donald Trump, who is nearly 80 years old, fell asleep in the middle of a meeting in the Oval Office with the press right in front of him, a whole bunch of women behind him, and Dr. Oz in the room as well to talk about women's health care. That is
not so sure he fell asleep. I think he blinked. And of course, the screenshot goes wild, right? Or whatever.
The big story of the day, correct? Yes, it's a distraction from things like this. See, I was digging, and I'm always trying to find what is it that they are trying to distract from. Here's one of those things. As it would turn out, the United States counterterrorism strategy was updated for 2026. Let's look at the date of the signature on the forward for this strategy document. It's very small at the bottom. I've highlighted it. Hopefully you can see it. Signed and dated at the bottom of the presidential forward on this document is not just Donald Trump's signature, but the month of May 2026, meaning this document was published publicly for all to see within the last 11 days. It is currently almost the end of May 11th, 2026. And this is the first I am seeing of it because I was doing research for something else. I also want to point out that while all of the forward is just him talking about how great he is, at the very bottom here, it says our new U.S. counterterrorism strategy, meaning for 2026, is a return to common sense and peace through strength. As I said, after our first successful counterterrorism mission, just days after I was sworn back in office, if you hurt Americans or are planning to hurt Americans, quote, we will find you and we will kill you. While it is a ridiculous, almost exact Liam Neeson from the movie Taken quote, it does apply to what I'm about to show you. Lock in. I'm not going to read this whole document to you. It's very small print. I encourage you to look it up yourself. But I do want to point out that they talk very early on in the document about what the threats are. So they talk about what it was in 2025, and they decide that in 2026, there are three major types of terror groups, and they list them as follows. Number one, narco-terrorism and transnational gangs. Number two, legacy Islamist terrorists.
Check.
And number three, violent left-wing extremists, including anarchists and anti-fascists. If you will note, that last group is very, very vague. It could include anarchists, it could include anti-fascists, and then it also includes just whoever they determine to be left-wing extremists. So like, it's very hard to pin down who these people might be. They go on to say that with these three groups or types of terror groups, as they call them, we can defeat every single one of these groups, but the threat is significant and pervasive. Stay with me. You will find that.
So this is obviously kind of, in my opinion, concerning enough because it's open-ended. Right? Left-wing violent anarchist groups.
Yeah.
We just went through a regime where they were going after right-wing extremists funded by the SPLC in order to fight right-wing extremism. But we ended up on that list.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up on that list. That took what should have been a quote-unquote 50-50 day, you even get arrested, to misdemeanor mischief, to a 7-year prison sentence, obstruction of Congress. You know, they were trying, they threatened. I have the base statement. Threatening terror enhancements.
Yeah,
on
to
my
all of our
sentence.
Democrat friends, I'm not excited about that third bullet.
I'm not excited about that third bullet either, because the group can expand when they get rid of the actual anarchist and violent left-wing extremists. Then next thing you know, anybody who has Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals on their shelf is a target.
Language throughout this, when it comes to talking about these quote-unquote left-wing violent extremists, or however they're labeling them, is very, very vague, which I believe is purposefully done. That means they can change the definition whenever they want. They can accuse someone based on a loose-fitting definition that they can ebb and flow and shape into something that they want it to be with each and every individual that they feel is needing to be labeled with such a terrorist label. This is what they say they will do. So it says, in addition to cartels and Islamist terror groups, our national CT activities will also prioritize the rapid identification and neutralization of violent secular political groups whose ideology is anti-American, radically pro-transgender, and anarchist. We will use all the tools constitutionally available to us to map them at home, identify their membership, map their ties to international organizations like Antifa, which doesn't make any sense because Antifa is not a thing.
Remember how I said she's a leftist? Doesn't make any sense because Antifa is not a thing. Have you met a member of Antifa? It is a very real thing. I think that's like That's one of the biggest, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is to convince the world he doesn't exist.
That's like Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Antifa's just an idea.
It's just an idea. Well, it's a radical idea that's well funded.
And use law
It has manuals.
enforcement tools to cripple them operationally before they can maim or kill the innocent. We will do the same with the state sponsors of such groups and those governments undertaking lethal plots on U.S. soil or against Americans anywhere. Not only does the individual who is speaking out need to be aware of that language, it reads so vaguely that it could even be applied to midterms. Because if you look at a politician and their platform, they might talk about being pro-LGBTQ, which includes pro-transgender rights and things like that. And then they also talk about the organizations that back them up, such as the state sponsors, what they call them, could be anyone donating to a campaign or organizing with a campaign. This is not fear-monger content. You can say it is if you want, but I am telling you that this strategic document is outlined this way and is so vaguely written this way that they can choose to do anything that they want to do with law enforcement, as it points out, to the individual, to the political candidate, to the campaign, to the party they feel is wronging them. And as you read through the document, it's even crazier because then things like this come up. They talk about new and deepening alliances between the far left and Islamists, i.e. the Red-Green Alliance. So they're painting anyone who is of the Muslim faith, anyone who is far left or leftist or anarchists or whatever they want to label them, as the enemy. This is a document that really, truly creates the enemy within that they keep trying to sell people. And this is a very scary document that no one is talking about, which then, of course, comes all the way back to the presidential foreword at the beginning, where he uses the almost Liam Neeson quote of, "We will find you and we will kill you."
Now, this is an upgrade. With right-wing extremists, they were like, we will find you and put you in prison. Now it's like, we're just going to take you off the map.
Oh,
now, again, when I say any tool we give to them, they will turn around and use against you. This woman, a year and a half ago, would have been saying, it's good that we're going after white supremacists and far-right neo-Nazis, et cetera, et cetera.
Throw them in jail.
And that looped us into that situation. So on one hand, right, these guys are now victims of their own success, right? You took all those tools, created all those tools, and now it's going to be against your candidates, not just the Tea Party, not just quote unquote election deniers, not just alternative electors, not just pro-life protesters, right? It's now going to be used against the people who actually shoot up schools. I'm unaware of any white supremacists that have shot schools up, but I know of a slew of transgender people who have, right? Including Charlie Kirk's assassin, who was clearly in that camp, right?
Yeah.
So on one hand, I agree with the mission. Yeah, break up the Red-Green Alliance. I got no love in my heart for communists. I got no love in my heart for anti-fascists, which is just a nice way of saying communist that opposes capitalist socialism, right? It's capitalist socialism, national fascism. Right? So it's another one of those situations where I agree. Now, our Constitution is designed to create protections for the individual. However, it gets railroaded by the actual Department of Justice. Here's Rod Blagojevich, former governor of Illinois, who was targeted by the Obama administration. Specifically, when Obama left his Senate seat and became president, the allegation was that Blagojevich was trying to take a bribe for that seat. And it ended up landing him, was it a 10 or 20-year prison sentence?
Yep.
So this is him talking about how the DOJ just goes off the rails.
Your case became one of the most well-known federal prosecutions, but in hindsight, what are the lessons that it teaches us about the overreach and abuse of power?
Good question, Colonel. I think maybe the best lesson I probably learned from that whole experience was don't just assume that those people, the FBI agents and the prosecutors, the federal prosecutors, are the good guys. I made the mistake to think that they were. I made the mistake to think that they were interested in justice. I thought that you can honestly work with them in good faith. And it's the case of being a governor with something like 53,000 employees. If somebody did something wrong, you want to make sure you get it right, that you can work with them and actually correct the mistakes or even root out those that are doing things wrong. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that it was all about trying to get the guy at the top so they can make names for themselves and become big fancy lawyers with $1 million salaries as partners. So I think the mistake I made was thinking that you can work with them in a good faith way and that they would act in good faith. And it's unfortunate. I don't want to malign FBI agents or prosecutors because I'm a former prosecutor myself at the state level. I still believe that most of them are good people who are committed to do right and to do justice. But all too often now we found, I think in recent history, that many of them are using their positions of power as platforms to go on to career advancement. And I think one case in point that I'd like to point out is the Arthur Anderson case. And you've got this lawyer named Weinstein, I think his name is, on CNN,
Weinstein, who's now a commentator at CNN, who went on to be the lieutenant from Robert Mueller during the Russiagate investigation. He's the one who crafted the 1512 obstruction of Congress charge based on this Arthur Anderson prosecution that I was charged with. So a shredding documents case ended up being what they charged me with, obstruction of Congress. So I touched this situation here, right? I touched this situation.
Prosecuted the Arthur Anderson case on obstruction of justice and other issues. And the United States Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the standard that was used to convict the people at Arthur Anderson was unlawful. That it was.
This is a great example of if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. I was a septic designer and a septic installer. And this high-power lawyer, Weitzman, who went after Arthur Anderson because of the Enron scandal and was overturned at the Supreme Court 9-0, his work and his corruption and his misuse of the justice system eventually came for the septic designer in the Pacific Northwest. You think you're immune? You think what you do doesn't matter? You think that they can't come after you when they create these awesome tools and powers? Oh, buddy, they can.
That they didn't break a law. And as a result, that company went out of business and thousands of people lost their jobs. And Andrew Weissman gets a promotion, he gets on television and becomes a legal analyst for a network like CNN. And that shouldn't be. And I think there has to be some sort of accountability for some of these people who abuse their power. And so I would simply say that through my long and hard and unhappy experience, I think the best thing we can do as citizens is to recognize a fundamental principle of human nature, and that is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Our founding fathers understood this, created a system dividing power. What they didn't foresee was a cancer within the executive branch of these uncontrolled prosecutors using that power to gain advancement and using it to terrorize others who are the ones who make the rules, but don't dare to try to do anything to reform it, lest those same people focus their guns and their...
Did you hear that? They use it to terrorize the people who make the rules, the legislatures, but don't ever do anything about it because then those guns could get turned on them. This is where the allegations of blackmail. What is the point of the FBI? Oh, we opened that investigation 3 years ago on corruption. Hadn't done anything about it until Trump came around. And then we actually executed a search warrant. They could have just sidled up to that representative, that senator in Virginia and been like, hey, we got a little something on you, but we need you to do this redistricting thing or not do it or whatever the case is. In that White House correspondent shooter case, this is the transcript from his hearing in front of the judge. And this is the DC circuit. This is the same courthouse that I was charged in. January 6 defendants were all moved to CTF. That's where I was at after I took my time in solitary confinement. The portion of the building with windows, they were all housed in CTF. It was before your time. Now, we were not housed in CTF. We went to CDF, and there were no windows. We spent our time in solitary confinement, and then they moved you into CTF. So this guy's been arrested at this point like 4 days, and he's been in solitary confinement for 4 days. Listen, he hasn't even gotten to where I was at in solitary confinement, okay? The court, well, yes, sir. Well, a lot of people seem to have forgotten about January 6th. I have not. This is a judge who sat on January 6 cases. Pardons may erase convictions, but they do not erase history. I had many, There was really easily right dozens, if not more people, there with firearms. False. False. That day that were brought, people got closer to killing the president that day. What?
What are you talking about?
This is a judge. This is a lifetime appointed judge.
Oh, boy.
They were hanging gallows outside of the front of the Capitol. Nobody got arrested for that because we believe the FBI put up those gallows. Okay? We believe the FBI put up those gallows. They got into the building. These folks were all housed in CTF at the GC jail. Many did not have criminal histories. True. And I'm just trying to understand why there is this great difference between Mr. Allen's situation and what happened there. What? What?
I don't know.
You're comparing me, a January 6th defendant who did do time in CDF and solitary confinement, more time than this guy, who actually went in and fired shots. He shot a Secret Service agent. And were it not for the bulletproof vest and a cell phone in his shirt pocket, it would have killed him. He ran into the White House Correspondents' Dinner with multiple guns and knives, intent to kill anybody and everybody. I just wanted him to send the vote back to the legislature to recount the ballots. They were given the benefit of the treatment of going over to CTF. They were given the benefits of being on the side of the jail with windows and treatment. None of them were in 5-point harnesses. Yeah, we were. And so I'm just trying to understand, if we were able to house all the January 6th defendants at CTF, why Mr. Allen doesn't have that same benefit as someone without a criminal history. This judge is purposely ignorant on this situation. Purposely ignorant. Now, in Tennessee, when they did the redistricting, there was some obstruction going on. Some of the members of the Democrat side of that legislative body protested as they did the redistricting and eliminated the one Democrat seat that was in Tennessee. And so notice was sent out to the members who obstructed from the state of Tennessee. This is from Tennessee Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton. Due to the actions taken by members of the Democrat caucus during the second extraordinary session of the 114th General Assembly, aimed at disrupting the democratic and legislative process and creating disorder on the House floor, including but not limited to interlocking arms in the well of the House, blocking aisles on the House floor, instigating and encouraging disruptions of the legislative process in coordination with paid protesters and attendees in the gallery, including the distribution of earplugs to a member of your caucus, the use of prohibited props and noisemakers on the House floor, demonstrating a lack of respect toward fellow members seeking recognition to speak on legislation, and flagrant disregard for the permanent rules of House order. Members of the Democratic caucus will receive individual letters removing them from all standing committees and subcommittees of the House, except where membership is required pursuant to Rule 65 of the House rules. Sincerely, Cameron Sexton. So those guys obstructed their legislative process and they got removed from their committees. I spent time in prison. And the actual assassin of Donald J. Trump, the guy who came at him with a gun and actually did open fire on a Secret Service agent, he's going to move over to the part of the jail with windows.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. Rand Paul is having a hearing this week, or today, I think. And this has to do with a CIA whistleblower who has come forward with evidence on a deep state conspiracy to cover up the COVID-19 origins. So we have seen one individual indicted already for covering up the origins because it came from a lab, not from a wet market. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that this goes a lot deeper. The CIA was directly involved in this. Okay. Now, this ties into the election, of course, 2020, the birth of Peasants' perspective over COVID-19 and all the shenanigans that were happening during the pandemic. Turns out it was a CIA operation. And ultimately, as we have followed the story extensively, it led to election fraud.
This wasn't just some organic thing?
It doesn't seem that way.
Capitol Hill about an alleged deep state conspiracy to cover up the origins of COVID-19. Maddie Rivera joins us live from Washington with the details. Hey, Maddie.
Good morning, Lawrence. So Senator Rand Paul has been investigating the origins of COVID-19 for years. He's been making the case that COVID-19 came from a lab leak in Wuhan, China, as a result of risky research. Paul subpoenaed several federal agencies last year. This morning, he says a whistleblower from the CIA will back up his allegations. Senator Paul told the New York Post the CIA veteran was detailed to the office of the Director of National Intelligence. The whistleblower was reportedly part of an initiative to study how the pandemic began, and he alleges ODNI spied on his review group and withheld documents.
I think this whistleblower will help to confirm that this was known, has been known for a long time, and that when the scientists at the CIA looked at this, they discovered, or they concluded, that the virus had come from the lab. What we're going to find is that the cover-up is a real thing, that there are members of the community, the intelligence community, that still don't want the truth to come out.
It's unclear what evidence the whistleblower might present to prove these accusations of spying. His identity remains a secret, and Paul says he's risking a lot by going public. The Senate hearing kicks off around 10 a.m. local time.
Now, We have a new pandemic that's burgeoning. It's got a long incubation period, so we're going to watch this one roll out hard and fast and heavy. And we've already played on this show that we suspect that the leak came out of a lab in Australia, that they lost the virus. It just, don't know where it went, but don't worry, we're looking for it. We put out an APB to all the local
Went on
cops.
vacation, bro.
Exactly. So we already, on this show, The Peasant's Perspective, have identified a potential lab leak or a lab theft that would lead to the release of this hantavirus Andes strain, which is communicable person to person. It's an election season. It's going to be a disputed election again. It's just like 2020. The stakes are that high for the Democrat socialist wing of the world globalist organization. Okay. And of course, the same players are at it again.
On the hantavirus, we continue to pray for all American cruise ship passengers exposed to hantavirus and those who remain in quarantine. I can only imagine how distressing this experience has been. The Trump administration's gutting of America's public health preparedness has made the recent hantavirus outbreak even more alarming.
Man, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, doesn't it?
The gaslight colors are so brilliant.
Now, yesterday, FDA chief Marty McCary resigned. He sent a text message to Donald Trump. Donald Trump just screenshot the text message and posted it. Now, Marty McCary did do some good things in his tenure at the CDC this last year and a half or whatever it's been. However, Robert Malone, who also went to the CDC, had some critical things to say about Marty McCary. So it's very interesting that on the verge of this hantavirus outbreak, that is the deep state, the CIA, was involved in some type of cover-up, that Robert Malone would speak out on this. Now, who's Robert Malone? He was the inventor of the mRNA technology. He's the guy who invented the technology that eventually made its way into all the COVID vaccines. He also worked with DARPA and the CIA and stuff like that. So he does have that deep state knowledge and understanding, obviously working from the medical field. Well, he was on with Redacted podcast, and he was talking specifically about Marty McCary and how he was still promoting the cover-up.
The moral transgressions, the corruption, the distortion of data, the falsification of data, the suppression of key findings, such as the pediatric deaths that are not being allowed to be released to the public.
Who's blocking that? So children deaths because of COVID-19 shots, that's being suppressed?
The name is Marty.
Marty McCary.
Yeah.
So you've named a few names now. Heidi Overton, Marty McCary. Really?
Who testified to Congress against, mandates, vaccine mandates.
Yeah, so I really, there's a lot of dynamics that are going on. There is a huge amount of rumor mill going on about the reorg. As you know, there was just a major reorg at HHS with promotion of some key leaders from within the CMS group that's been so effective under Dr. Oz's leadership to positions where they're functionally chief operating officer for HHS. There's just been a major amount of change within the overall sixth floor operation. And of course, now we have a case where the nominated Surgeon General is not going to clear Senate approval. And so that's another issue.
So we still have obstruction on getting people in there to change things. And Marty McCary, I thought it was McCary. Anyways, Marty McKay, whatever his name is, he is part of the obstruction. So it's like he's doing some good things on one hand, but at the same time, he's still covering up the total effect of what COVID did to the Americans, specific pediatric deaths. How would you like to know if our government was responsible for children dying because of a pandemic cover-up to usher in the New World Order, digital IDs? Thank you, King Charles, for making that happen sooner, right? Digital IDs, contact tracing, lockdowns, economic destruction. And here you've got the guy right at the verge of the hantavirus outbreak. At least he resigned now, because a tiger doesn't ever really lose its stripes, do they? Speaking of deep state cover-ups, we had UFO disclosures this last week. we got a whole ton of grainy footage. It was amazing. Like more great. There's better footage out on YouTube and X on viral videos that people have taken in their backyard of the orbs than what the government produced to us. But at least the government is producing something saying, yeah, we don't know what this is. It's really interesting how some of the stuff that they release, like the little star-shaped, things, are identical to stuff that was put in movies in the 60s and 70s and 80s as like UFOs. It's like almost like they knew. So with regards to the release of information, Anna Paulina Luna and Representative Tim Burkhart had a little press gaggle in the hallway, and they are openly coming out and saying the deep state, somebody in the deep state, has short-circuited the release of this information, that they are aware of specific technology and specific things that should have been released, but it looks like outside of the democratic process, outside of the executive order, outside of the votes from Congress to release this information, some entity has come in and blocked the release of critical information.
I had access to the SCIF, and so to my knowledge, what's going to happen now is not only do we have the support of the chairman, but they're going to get a nice letter from Congress. And as you heard, Representative Ogle said, if we're denied, we're going to use the Holman rule. We'll defund the position.
And I was told by leadership that it was blocked by the intelligence community, not the intelligence committee, but the intelligence community. And that is a very chilling effect. If you reach, someone can reach through the veil of government and pierce it to the point of we do not have access to something, you got to start asking yourself who the hell's in control. And I think it'd be wise for you all to start looking at some financial disclosures of some of those corporations, some of the people who do the stonewalling in this town. And that's what we're going to start doing. We're going to start talking to people. We're going to start naming names. I want you to think about this. Think about this, that something with the capabilities of traveling light years, not showing a heat signature, and the energy capabilities of that would put the Pentagon out of business. We wouldn't be fighting these worthless wars overseas over oil, and American boys and girls wouldn't be dying. It would put the war pigs out of business, and they'd have to go somewhere else. And I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
So basically, the ability to travel light years and have that endless source of energy that it would take to do that would put the war pigs out of business. Mm-hmm. So one of the war pigs decided, I don't care about your Constitution. I don't care about your legislative process. I don't care about any of that. We're not releasing that information because otherwise we wouldn't have a marketplace for Tomahawk missiles. It wouldn't work out very well. Yep. It is very, very interesting. Now, in 2020, the odds of Joe Biden winning the election in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin at the point where they stopped counting. If you remember, you're watching TV, November 2020, and you're watching the election vote come in, and then all of a sudden a water main breaks in Georgia, a water main breaks in Arizona, and the others are like, it's getting late. We're tired. We want to go home. And they stopped counting ballots. And then over the night, they continued to process ballots. The odds of winning these states before counting stopped on election night, Georgia for Joe Biden was 8%, and then 83%, and then 99%. So 99% chance he couldn't win Georgia. It was 16% to 64% to 99% he couldn't win Pennsylvania. Mathematically, Trump had won. In any normal year, the election desks at the different news outlets that were covering the election that night, would have called coverage, would have absolutely called it for Trump.
Yep.
Michigan, 10 to 59 to 97%. Wisconsin, 4.9 to 82% to 97%. The odds of all four states of Joe Biden winning at that point, 1 in 11.1 million, or 0.00009%.
Not happening.
Not happening. Now, the odds of him winning the election and then turning around and persecuting the people who spoke out against it, 100%. 100%.
I wonder how close that first percentage is to winning the Powerball twice in a row.
Bro, no kidding, right? I mean, talk about the luckiest guy ever. I saw another thing that was like, if you flipped a coin 1,000 times and if 52% was going one way, and then you flipped it another 1,000 times and it went 100% on the heads, odds of that, about what Joe Biden had in winning the election. Pretty rare. Donald Trump posted this. He posted an old video from Sidney Powell talking about the destruction of evidence, the machines, and kind of everything that's going on. More and more and more, this stuff is getting into the mainstream. As Donald Trump continues to pound on this, not just saying it was a rigged election, but exposing how it was rigged, we are getting to the point of 2020 disclosure. Remember, it's dominoes, right? The SPLC went down. Why? Because they funded Charlottesville. And in discovering who funded Charlottesville, which became the initial Fine People hoax, the thing that turned the American zeitgeist against Donald Trump, which was then followed up by Russiagate, which was then followed up by Ukrainegate, which was then followed up by the COVID pandemic, which was then followed up by the election fraud, which was then followed up by January 6th. You see how there's a domino effect here? These are all connected things. We are starting to get more and more information disclosure, and law enforcement is still all the way back at the Charlottesville rally. So what's the next thing in line for that? Russiagate accountability and the grand conspiracy. What's the next thing after that? COVID cover-up and that prosecution. What's after that? The 2020 election fraud. What's after that? J6. So at some point, we're going to have law enforcement catch up with the information disclosures we've had.
Destroying evidence right and left in Georgia, in Cobb County, Gwinnett County, Fulton County. It's everything from shredding ballots to wiping machines and replacing servers. All these machines should have been impounded the day after the election and reviewed for forensic analysis. We have so many judges out there now that are result driven instead of applying the rule of law like it should be. And we have political prosecutions that never should have happened in this country. Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Arizona. Those were fatally flawed by massive fraud in every manner and means you can think of, but especially insidious and troubling is the machine fraud conducted through the Dominion voting systems. In fact, one of our experts says Dominion fraud was 5% higher votes for Biden across the board everywhere there was a Dominion machine running. And the same was true for other Democrats that were running on the tickets in those states. It makes me wonder where in the world is our FBI and our Department of Justice. And I'm frankly very concerned that this entire system was originated likely by the CIA and maybe even given to Venezuela years ago or seeded in different places that it wound up with Venezuela, which started the Smartmatic and Dominion companies. And the only reason they have a Boca Raton address here in the United States is to try to make them seem like a United States company. But they're not. They're owned, run, and were organized and created by Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez with his dirty money and the dirty money of the Cuban communists to ensure he had won every election after it was used. One of our witnesses was a direct, firsthand, personal observer of all of that, received the briefings on how it all worked, saw it work in the control room for election after election, and has given us detailed affidavit to explain it all. There's people who say there's no evidence, just are lying through their teeth, or they're deliberately ignorant or willfully blind to the truth. And frankly, they're part of the problem. I mean, a lot of the people who are saying there's no evidence are part of the problem and know damn well that all this happened and may have even instigated it, benefited from it, paid for it, encouraged it.
Kind of like how the CIA was like, hey, there's no COVID coming from a lab that we funded. Kind of like how judges in Texas are like, hey, there's no election fraud but we paid for election fraud, right? They benefit from it. Que bono. How about how these down ballot Democrats that were also put into power with this election fraud in 2020 and likely elections before that and elections after that. So I don't mean to be a black pillar or a doomer. Donald Trump's in office. You know why? Because you can be too big to rig. What if someday we actually got an official count of real ballots and we found out Donald Trump won the country at 80%? Oof. That would be pretty incredible, wouldn't it? That would be pretty incredible. Ron, are we going to take a quick coffee break?
Yes, let's do it. Still haven't tried 1775 coffee? Now it's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold, dark roast that hits hard, the smooth, medium roast, and the Vitality Mushroom Coffee for clean energy and laser focus. No crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin-free, and mold-free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic. A frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does.
Yes, some Rumble 1775 coffee. Somebody's going to have to order that and tell us how good it is. All right, so this is Donald Trump out in front of a Marine One yesterday before he took off for China. And he was asked about elections. Are you going to send ICE to the polling centers? And he says the thing that I absolutely want to hear.
Would you send National Guard or ICE to voting locations in November? Would you do that?
Well, you know what? I'd do anything necessary to make sure we have honest elections. We have to have honest elections.
So you're not ruling that out?
Anything necessary to have honest elections. Now, the doomers and the retard right, they all think that Donald Trump is ineffective and can't do anything. Well, there is some truth to some of the things that we want to see happen now have not happened. There's a reason for that. Here's Mitch McConnell in the Senate yesterday. And as he's sitting here wrapping up a committee hearing, one of his aides steps up and whispers in his ear, "Hey, we're not done. We want to let some of the Democrats testify." There he is. So you can't really hear it, but he's telling Mitch McConnell that you're not done. And Mitch McConnell, who's getting old and elderly, is like, okay. Now he's probably confused. So Donald Trump posted this while he was on Air Force One. That guy that came up to Mitch McConnell today when McConnell thought the hearing was over and started speaking in his ear for Mitch to belatedly introduce some other people, all Democrats, and by doing so made Mitch look foolish and completely out of it, should be immediately fired. This was a case where Mitch wasn't confused. He just didn't understand why he was being asked to do something when it was too late. The meeting was over and people were wrapping up to leave. They wanted to go home. His name is Robert Kareem. He is a never Trumper and was grandstanding, trying to show how important he was. Kareem has tremendous Democrat support, far greater than he should have, and is praised relentlessly by Obama's people. He is probably the reason why Mitch McConnell is stupidly opposed to terminating the filibuster and refuses to help with a 97% issue, the Save America Act. Fire the bum, Donald J. Trump. I do see that. I think we have never Trumpers and we have old school conservatives who do the same thing over and over again and never get different results that are out there. Here's one that was inside Trump's first administration, Mike Pence. And he has this to say: Republicans have some real soul searching to do before 2028.
Whether we're going to follow the siren song of populism unmoored to conservative principles. And there are loud voices in and out of government, some of which have been able to influence the new Trump administration in ways that are taking our party and our movement far afield from those traditional conservative underpinnings. And where we've always been the party of a strong defense. And we see America as the leader of the free world, the arsenal of democracy. There are a rising chorus of isolationist voices in the Republican Party.
Okay, so we oppose globalism and we want national defense, a strong military. Do you get it? Mitch McConnell, he's just an obstructionist in every single way possible. And the conservatives pair up with the retard right. Here's John Doyle again explaining the retard right.
Then you've got like a lot of like pro-MAGA spheres online, maybe, on the more dissident side of things, people like me, a lot of good Twitter accounts. Like these are the kinds of people who are, certifiably based and red-pilled on the issues, but also not retarded. That appears to be a very difficult balance to strike. And we like Trump because we recognize correctly that he's been the best thing to happen to the American right in literally who knows how many decades. So even if the retard right owes basically everything to our president, with a few exceptions like Tucker, most of the retard right personalities were like nobodies before Donald Trump came along. But unlike them, we didn't betray the president to chase clicks from people in places of the world that just got internet access. And I think a big difference between us is that our guys like actually read, whereas the average person on the retard right, they have a worldview like that is entirely derived from short form podcast clips. So we would prioritize issues like immigration, issues like cracking down on anti-white discrimination over the sort of like endless complaining and pontificating that is very popular in short form social media content. Even though, again, there are perfectly valid critiques you could make of Jewish organizations, the Israeli government. You can criticize all of these things. So the way that they go about that, though, it tends to attract the lower common denominators, which famously are not very helpful in some kind of like, I don't know, ascendant political cause. So while not Zionists ourselves, we still recognize that like Jewish people, people who like Israel, are a large portion of the right. and also a reliable sect of GOP voters. And so we're trying to approach the issue diplomatically. We're trying to recognize that, if you put third world anti-Zionism at the center of a political movement, it's going to be counterproductive to the changes that we want to see on these aforementioned issues, whether it's because the capital it attracts is completely retarded, or because by putting that issue in the center, you're trying to ally with people who are putting that issue in the center, even if they're not retarded, ultimately their priorities are completely different. Allying with the sort of like anti-Zionist left who prioritizes anti-Zionism because they are against what they perceive to be like European civilization and its outgrowths. They're not exactly going to take it easy on white people, on white people's attempts to get these people out of their country, anything like that.
And that's what happens with people like Thomas Massey and others who go full on anti-Israel, is they end up taking money from Islamists who will just line you up against the wall and chop off your head real soon, right? As soon as they break up the right into these disparate factions, some far right retard rights that end up aligning with the far left retard left. And again, these different factions get inside of the party. Here's John Thune talking about the Save America Act. Now, keep in mind, the Save America Act has like 87% support in the country, 70+% amongst Democrats, 90+% amongst Republicans. And here he is saying he doesn't have enough Republican votes to end the filibuster and get the Save America Act passed. And keep in mind, the Democrats, who even their constituency supports this 70+%, you can't get any of those votes over either. It kind of makes you wonder who's actually in charge, the people or the power.
We don't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. We called it up on the floor March, I think 17th. We were on it for several weeks and had a very spirited debate. In fact, I think with the exception of maybe a couple of Republican senators, made more speeches on the floor in support of the SAVE Act than almost any other senator. And we had some votes on it. And we voted on the narrow issue, which is the most popular one, of voter ID. And we put the Democrats on the record. Every single Democrat voted against it. We added, and one of the other elements, also popular, was whether or not biological boys ought to play in girls' sports. We had that vote, and every Democrat voted against that as well. So we've taken what I think are probably the two issues, in my view, that have the broadest public support and put the Democrats on record, and every single one of them voted against it. So we'll look for opportunities to get other votes. There was a vote on the budget resolution, an amendment that Senator Kennedy offered that didn't even get 50 votes on the floor. And so we're continuing to look for opportunities to advance that legislation. Obviously, it's something that I support. I think we all support. And we think it's something that the American people are broadly supportive as well.
Now, when the Democrat leadership wants to go
hold on. Did he just say that they voted 100% against DEI stuff?
The Democrats did.
They did?
Yeah. Okay. Not against it, for it. By not voting to ban men and women's restrooms, they voted for it.
Okay.
Now, when Democrat leadership has an issue that they want to push, everybody gets lockstep in line. Even John Fetterman, who's out there criticizing his own party from time to time, will go and vote for something like that because leadership said so. Okay. When his vote doesn't matter, they let him vote for wherever he wants. But when his vote matters, he gets in line with the party. Why can't the Republican leadership do the same thing? Listen, you want money? Got to vote for it. You want support? Got to go for it. You want committee seats? Vote for it. Why don't they use those levers? Why do they allow some small voice of people to not overturn the filibuster on key issues like this? I don't understand. How about this? Overturn the filibuster and then put it back. Let's do that. Right. Let's get this one wildly popular issue in place. But instead, they hide behind closed doors. We had a robust debate, and there was some real interesting arguments about it. But in the end, we decided not to support the people and to allow illegal aliens to vote. Makes you wonder how many of those Republicans might be in on the election fraud themselves and owe their seats to it.
Yeah.
Even on the 5, when we start talking about local elections, we start talking about Los Angeles and Spencer Pratt specifically. Even on the 5, they're token Democrat on the 5 panel. They always have Jessica Tarlov or they have Gerald Ford Jr. on there. These are ardent Democrats. Even Gerald Ford Jr. concedes the fact The Spencer Pratt is actually talking to the people.
Last week, the shine is coming off the California dream. I don't disagree with anything Kennedy has said. I think Spencer Pratt, I was wrong last week. I went back and watched the debate. I didn't think he offered as many, and you got into it a little bit. I think you were right. I was wrong. He offered a lot. He offered a lot. What he's doing is what every politician should do. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, offer real, practical, actionable solutions to actual problems that people are facing. The young lady you just showed in our opening, the city councilman, she's reading from a national playbook that just says attack Trump and hopefully Democrats. That's what will excite Democrats. I'm here to tell you that may be part of it, but at the end of the day, Angelenos understand that homelessness is a problem. They understand that public safety is a problem. They understand that housing is unaffordable for most Californians and most Angelenos. And whether you like this guy or not, whether you think he may be close to Trump or not close to Trump, I give him a lot of credit. He's tackling this in an unorthodox, unusual way for today's politics, which should be the norm. He's actually offering answers. I say that as a Democrat. So Democrats running in this race, if you don't start offering answers, this guy could very well surprise. Jesse and I agreed last week. He could actually win this thing, even though Los Angeles is such a heavily Democratic place, because people are fed up with the answers that are not being given.
I think that's exactly the case. And one of the other issues that's really important to the Democrats, the bleeding heart Democrat, liberal crowd, is child safety. Remember, this was the clarion call during the Epstein stuff was, what about the kids? And if you can't prosecute the pedophiles, what can you do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, with the open border came a slew of unaccompanied minors that got put into federal custody and then got passed around the different foster homes and things like that. And we know from RFK Jr. and others that there were 300,000 to 400,000 missing kids. Well, the New York Times ran an article on this, and guess who was in charge of these missing kids? Xavier Becerra, who is running for governor of California. And so KTLA, local news channel down there, sat down with him for an interview, and they brought up this New York Times article. They may have single-handedly ended his prospects to be governor.
During your time as HHS secretary, a New York Times investigation found the health department couldn't find some 85,000 children it had released.
That's not accurate. What you just read is not accurate. First, that's what I'll say, because it was never the case that we could not find kids. You're essentially, I don't know if you got those talking points from Donald Trump.
It's from a New York Times article.
That's not what the New York Times article said. The New York Times said that individuals, the children and their sponsors, did not respond to calls. They didn't say we couldn't find kids.
Working overnight in slaughterhouses, replacing roofs, operating machineries in factories, children as young as 14 years old.
That part occurred after these children had left the care of Department of Health and Human Services.
To let these children go into those individual sponsors in their responsibility.
Some of these kids, probably because they needed to earn some money, started working in places that were very exploitive.
Why would a 14-year-old need to earn some money, Ron? Why would a 14-year-old need to go work in a slaughterhouse?
I don't know.
Oh, we lost track of him. Oh, no, we didn't. We could find him. Like Tom Holman found him. I mean, we could always find him. We didn't want to find him. We didn't want to find him. That's a big deal there. It's a huge deal. Shifting over to the economy, we've got some bad news coming out of the housing market. New York Post reports this. House prices will plummet in these 300 U.S. housing markets, the study finds. So if we go click on this link, you can see here. Let's see if we have a list of the housing markets. Anyways, a lot of these housing markets around the country, we're going to see plummeting house prices. Now, part of this is because of the high interest rates that we're paying. Part of this is because of the deportations that have been happening, loosening up availability. This is one of the reasons why the rental market has dropped in cities where there's been large immigrant populations. So all of this is going to start having a compounding effect. Fox News Business reported on this. Things are not looking great for the housing market.
Fika is with us now. Jeff, you're big in real estate. What do you make of these numbers, first of all?
Well, David, I think they're terrible. First off, I think, we're in the seasonally strong time for selling
coming
homes.
Into it, yeah.
But now this is proving that to the first-time home buyer, this is still a blood-soaked hellscape for them. There's not a lot of inventory. That prices are extremely high and interest rates are too high. And then you have all the people who are in lower interest rate homes that would want to either trade up, trade down. They're frozen out because rates are so high, and they'd have to take their low interest rate to get a higher interest rate. So the point I'm trying to make is that nothing has changed. This $4 million homes number, because of what we've been through, does not show we've made any improvement in affordability, and there's nothing more important than affordability.
Got to increase that inventory. You mentioned energy prices.
Why do we have to increase the inventory if we have more houses on the market than ever before?
I have no idea.
These guys, I'm telling you, these business channels sometimes just don't get it. It's the Jim Cramer effect. Buy when it's time to sell and sell when it's time to buy, right? Why would we need more inventory? Now, long term, yeah, we need more inventory to lower prices.
Yeah.
But what has Trump said? He's trying to protect the equity of grandmama who's got her whole life savings in real estate. If you think that you're going to be able to put your life savings in real estate going forward, I think we're going to be really disappointed. In fact, long term, and we're going to talk about this in a couple minutes, I think that the entire real estate market and the equity market where people try to retain value is going to be making a big shift anyways.
How do you think the spike in energy prices is going to affect travel this summer, which is so important, critical?
Well, David, I look at travel as being, that to me is the gauge of travel, and leisure are the gauge of how the consumer is doing. Because think about it. If you have all your necessities covered, you're going to travel and you're going to spend money on leisure. Now, if you look at travel and leisure, it's been relatively strong because we've had a lot of rebound from the pandemic. Now what we're beginning to see is oil prices not only affect fuel, but they also affect hotel prices. Hotel rates go up. You have food.
But the question is how far these prices will go. So far, we're getting CPI numbers out this week. I believe it's tomorrow. How far will it go? Will these oil prices go and bleeding into the rest of the economy? Obviously, travel is big on it, but will we see it affect the core inflation rate?
It is, because now
it hasn't been so far.
Not so far, but there's this lagging element of oil prices, because the longer oil prices stay elevated, you're going to see basic material prices start to elevate. I'm seeing it in my own business when we're involved with construction of any kind. You're seeing lumber, concrete, you're seeing a lot of steel. A lot of those prices are beginning to move up, some faster than others. And the longer this takes, the longer it takes for oil to come down, the more those basic material prices are going to stay high.
All right,
I think it's really rich that we went through 4 years of the Biden regime with oil prices up above $4 a gallon for gasoline.
Yep.
And they're like, well, I mean, this 70-day incursion into Iran, it's killing the market. This stuff was structural. This stuff was going to happen no matter what. A couple things that could help with the availability of homes. One of the things they talked about is homeowners who are locked in their house. I know exactly what this is, right? I don't want to move. Why don't I want to move? Because I got a good interest rate.
Right.
If I move, I'm going to double my house price.
Imagine that you have a 2.5% interest rate.
Yeah. You think you want to go jump into a 7% interest rate right now?
Right.
You don't. Yeah, exactly. Now, a lot of this inflated pricing has to do with fraud. This has to do with misallocation of government dollars. Every time the government passes a bill that has a budget attached to it, they make the money. They create the money. They don't take it and borrow it from somewhere. They make it, and we, the taxpayer, have to pay the interest. And some of that money is designed to defeat some of the things that would cause this extra inventory. For example, homelessness. If someone's sleeping on the street, they're clearly not sleeping under a roof. So they're not sucking up that inventory. Why aren't they sucking up that inventory? They can't afford the houses. Why can't they afford the houses? Because there's no jobs and drug addiction. It kind of goes on and on and on. Well, James O'Keefe, or excuse me, Citizen Journalism Foundation, which is similar to James O'Keefe. They do undercover videos. They interviewed Donald Byers on undercover video. He's the finance development officer for the Los Angeles Housing Department. And he says something that we all know. We all know this. We all suspect it. But when you hear it from someone who's actually in charge of the finances and the money that's supposed to go to alleviate homelessness in California, it kind of hits home.
I have a couple of developers that are doing really sketchy stuff. If there's a project with a lot of money involved in it, someone's going to try to sue them. I mean, we can't figure out where all the money is going. LAHSA is the LA Housing, the Homelessness Services Department.
So they were stealing the money?
Most likely it's some form of embezzlement.
Where do you think the money is going?
People's pockets.
Ever caught any embezzlement while you were overseeing? And have you?
I've reported it. I've brought it up to people that are very aware of it, and I've already raised the red flag.
My God.
At this point, it's just me covering my ass, so it's all that I can do. I have a couple of them.
Even the people that are on the ground that sincerely want to help the homeless, they're watching the money go out the back door. They're watching it get embezzled. And he's whistleblown, but what can he do? At this point, he's like, I'm just trying to cover my own ass so I don't get blamed for it. Right? Now,
Embezzlers be embezzling.
This even strikes home here in Washington State. This is the Washington mayor, and she's trying to figure out where millions and millions of dollars have gone that is supposed to go to help homelessness here in our state, Ron, Washington.
The mayor of Federal Way, which happens to be the community where I live, is calling for an immediate suspension of all spending activities with the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, KCRHA.
Now, keep in mind, Katie Wilson in King County, Seattle mayor, is trying to raise taxes to defeat these kind of programs. In this little town just south of Seattle, which is Federal Way, they're saying, all this money that's supposed to be going to this, it's not.
Until a forensic accounting is complete to learn where every dollar has gone. Now, he is mentioning this because that recent forensic audit that was conducted uncovered $13 million missing completely, unaccounted for, and a nearly $45 million deficit for this organization that has received more than $530 million since its inception in 2019.
This is on a scale of incompetence that is nearly unheard of.
A scale of incompetence. I would call it fraud.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that goes on with this kind of fraud, homelessness, is you have rampant identity theft. Rampant identity theft. You also have immigration, that a lot of illegal immigrants do identity theft in order to get jobs. There's a California resident who has never lived in the state of Oregon ever. Never worked there, never had a job associated with Oregon, never lived there. And one day she opened up her bank account and there was $20,000 missing.
Ooh.
About 5 weeks ago, a California woman emailed the Oregonian Oregon Live asking for our help. She said about $20,000 had suddenly disappeared from her bank account. She originally thought she was the victim of cyber thieves and the money was gone forever. But then she discovered what really happened. The Oregon Department of Revenue had siphoned the money from her account for unpaid personal income taxes. The problem was she had never lived or worked in Oregon, and it was all a big mistake. The woman, Human Zoo, told me when she called the Oregon Department of Revenue and told them it was a mistake, they told her it would be maybe 5 months, maybe more before they got back to her. That's when I got involved. I think this is a story about the power of the press, but also a story about a government agency that collects tens of billions of dollars from taxpayers each year and charges penalties and interest if they're late. But as Human Zoo sees it, an agency that is slow or indifferent about returning money when it makes a mistake. I think there's also a little bit of outrage in this story because the address that the Oregon Department of Revenue thought that this California woman lived at was actually a park in Hillsborough. Human Zoo told me within days of signing an authorization form allowing the Oregon Department of Revenue to talk to me about her case, a manager called her and told her that the department would give her her money back. The department told me that it sent the check this week. You can read more about this in my story on Oregon.
A park? A park?
Ah, they didn't check.
Homelessness, identity theft, and stealing money right out of your bank account. Now, Thomas Jefferson, way back in the day, he saw a huge problem with money and central banking specifically. Because remember, the European model that we left was all about centralizing power through the king and his tax collection. And in America, we had a very decentralized finance system. There's a famous story of Benjamin Franklin who went to Europe and was in England and saw homelessness and debtor's prison and all kinds of vagrancy. And he's like, why do you guys have this? And they're like, well, what do you guys in America do with your debtors and your tax, absconders and people who can't pay their debts? He goes, we don't have any. We don't have any. And a big part of that was because the colonies issued their own money. Each individual was their own central bank. They were able to save their money, and the whole system worked. He said you couldn't find a tramp or a homeless person in the entire colonies. There isn't one. And when the King's Court in England heard that, they turned around and they imposed a central banking model on England, forcing them to use the English script rather than the colonial script. And what this did is this then led to the ability of the king to collect taxes, which is what led to the Boston Tea Party. The colonies absolutely would have paid a 2% tax on paper and whatnot. But what they couldn't abide was not being able to issue their own currency. So the revolution kicked off, and we often look at the Tea Party as, oh, it was a 2% tax, we opposed it. No, that wasn't what caused the Tea Party. What caused the Tea Party was we had to use the king's currency, and we no longer could ensure that there was actually any value backing that currency, which caused inflation and all that kind of stuff. The king had all the money to spend because he could make it, and it wasn't necessarily back to specific reserves. Nobody could audit the king's gold holdings, whereas you could audit your local gold warehouse because it was your gold on deposit. There wasn't hypothecation and fractional reserve lending at the time. So by the time the Tea Party happened, they were not just opposed to the tax. It was the series of taxes that were all imposed and forcing the colonists to use the king's script. So Thomas Jefferson understood this clearly. And he said this: the central bank is an institution of the most deadly hostility against the principles and form of our Constitution. I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. Already they have raised up a moneyed aristocracy that has set the government at defiance. The war pigs, they intervene from things that would end endless wars and end wars over things like oil, right? The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people whom it belongs. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations will grow up around them and deprive the people of all property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers occupied. And Thomas Jefferson said that on the 5th of June, 1824. Ron, has that not become the case? Is that not exactly what we see today? Ron Paul had this to say about money in a more recent time.
There is no other power greater than the power over money, the power to create and contract the money supply, the power to control the purchasing power of your money. Throughout history, this has proven to be the most sought after monopolistic power of man. It has become more sophisticated over the decades and over the centuries, more sophisticated now and more international in scope than ever before. So I see the issue of power and the control over money as being something that we cannot ignore, we must address. I believe closely associated with this is the issue of morality as well. By what moral right we have to create purchasing power out of thin air, whether it's done by the creation of credit or Federal Reserve notes, or whether it's the creation of SDRs in an international scope. By what right do they do this? Is it any more moral to dilute the value of your purchasing power of the money you hold in your wallet than it is for the farmer to dilute the milk supply with water? I would say there's an issue of morality here just as strong as the issue of power.
And we have seen depravity in our country. And a lot of it ties back to money. It all ties back to money. Something significant happened yesterday, though. We got the first text of the Clarity Act that is going to be passed, that is the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin structure bill, right? To create the guardrails for the new financial system. And there were some real wins for those of us that want to take back the issuance of currency and money. Let me read you a piece in here. This is dealing with Bitcoin. Self-custody. A federal agency may not prohibit, restrict, or otherwise impair the ability of a covered user to self-custody digital assets using a self-hosted wallet other means to conduct transactions or for any lawful purpose.
Oh.
This is the first time since 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt took gold and silver bullion in private possession, the right of that to transact with privately from the people. This is the first time that the American people have had a shot at private custody of their money. And when we talk about Bitcoin, it is not controlled by the central banks. Here's a little chart here I like a lot. This is Bitcoin versus gold. Bitcoin versus gold, and in every one of these, gold loses. And this is why Bitcoin is the new gold for people under 40. In the information age, in the internet age, Bitcoin will be like gold was back when all transactions were ultimately peer-to-peer. Portability, divisibility, verifiability, scarcity certainty, supply auditability, settlement speed, custody sovereignty, confiscation resistance, storage costs, transport costs, programmability, global liquidity, settlement finality, resistance to counterfeit, no trusted issuer, easier inheritance, collateral efficiency, transparency, censorship resistance, energy to scarcity conversion, monetary upgradability, unit consistency, lower friction, digital native compatibility, and personal sovereignty. We have a chance right now to really change things. And just like the war pigs oppose things like free energy and disclosure on how we get light speed travel, and just like the people who want to consolidate their communist power will centralize around things like contact tracing and digital ID and viruses that cause everybody to get locked in their houses. Just like that, the entities that benefit from the free printing of money, who are often the first stop on that money to collect their dues, things like the unions, are opposed to the Clarity Act. This is from CNBC. Now that the Clarity Act text has been revealed and it's scheduled for markup in the next few weeks, and the president has set an objective to sign it on July 4th, 2026, the 250th year anniversary of our nation. There's no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. Donald Trump has promised to return money to the people. He said things like he wants to get rid of the IRS, which destroys the central bank. Kevin Warsh, the new chairman of the central bank, is in favor of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin specifically because he says it will hold policymakers accountable. Just like in the days of Benjamin Franklin with colonial script, policymakers were held accountable because there was only so much gold in the bank, and you had to convince the people to surrender their gold for public investment. Whereas right now we don't get that. And who props up the bureaucracies? The unions.
This right now with more on that. Emily, what's the story?
Hey, Becky. Well, look, the crypto industry, they're only days away from seeing their top legislative priority get its first vote coming in a Senate panel. But that bill is facing some heavy opposition. We got a first look at the concerns that are raised by the heads of major labor unions. This is the AFL, SEIU, AFT, NEA, others. They've warned senators that backing
every one of those is government associated. AFL-CIO, that's America's union, that's government workers, federal workers.
Yep.
National Education Association, that's Department of Education, government workers.
This is government circling the wagons.
This is government circling the wagons.
This rules of the road bill for digital assets could legitimize crypto and, as a result, add volatility to workers' retirement, savings, and pensions account.
When your retirement, your savings, and your pensions account are dependent on the government, what's the better investment? Gold or Bitcoin or fiat currency that they can inflate away? Exactly.
In a letter, these labor groups told senators that the legislation would invite cryptocurrency industry to take outsized risks, knowing that if those risky bets do not pay off, it is working people and retirees, not crypto billionaires, who will pay the price. Now, the labor group's opposition could make it more difficult for some Democrats to support the bill. Right now, it's not actually clear if any Democrats on the banking committee are going to be voting for the bill when Thursday comes around. Several lawmakers told me they need to see more work on language around ethics, around conflict of interest, security. But to be clear, many Democrats, they do support this rules of the road crypto bill. They've been working.
Yeah, they do support the rules of the road crypto bill. Even here in Washington State, we have a lawmaker, Adrian Cortez, who is a Democrat. And Washington State just passed a millionaire's tax, which is a cloaked way to tax everybody, as he describes. This hurts everyone. Just like when the colonies switched from colonial script to the king's script, it hurt everyone. And it led to ultimately a revolution. And the Trump campaign, you go back all the way to 2016 when he talks about the elites. The way they control us is through money. The immorality of creating money to dilute the money supply, to steal from you through inflation, and then charge you the interest via taxation. Even this Democrat senator in Washington state understands this. These guises of millionaire tax or wealth tax just on the wealthy, they ultimately apply to everybody. Just like when we go after domestic terrorism for right-wing extremists or left-wing extremists, eventually they'll come after the church pastor. Eventually they'll come after the septic designer or the septic installer. We have to take our power back, and it starts with taking the money back. Ron, while we play this clip, will you drop the river link in the chat?
Yeah.
Time you put such a big issue like an income tax, I believe voters do need to have it's above and beyond just their elected representative. So I'm really hoping that we do see that happen, whether it's this year or next year. I do still have some serious concerns that tax could ultimately come down to working class families. What's going to protect it from a future session, a future legislative session, maybe 5-10 years down the road, from saying, okay, now instead of $1 million, it's going to be $750,000. It's going to be $500,000. Or it's going to be $200,000. Now it's going to be $100,000. Yeah, or let's just do what Oregon's doing and have it on everybody, right? I would really like to see some guardrails.
You'd like to see some guide rails. For me, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do. We have no income tax in our Constitution. We got it. We got it. You're rich. See ya. Right? And it will eventually come for everyone. That Bitcoin Clarity Act, if you do one thing, call your representative wherever you are and tell them to support it as it's written. It's not the perfect bill. No bill is. But self-custody is how you can have your own gold warehouse. It's how you can keep your wealth and pass it on without any government intervention. You can transact peer-to-peer again with that wealth. If you're not off zero, even if you're only going to invest a small amount, $5 or $10, get off zero. Make a pathway between yourself and Bitcoin so that you can have a piece of this internet gold. It is a gold rush right now. Bitcoin prices are at what will be considered all-time lows. In the future, when Bitcoin sucks up all that stored value that people are trying to store in artwork, people that do land banking was unheard of until we came off the gold standard in 1971, because it became simply a place to store value that kind of kept up with inflation. Land is only worth what you can do with it, what business you can put on it to make income, what rents you can charge, how many,
how much livestock you can put on it.
You can do. That's the only thing land is worth. Mm-hmm. There is no point to having extra real estate that you can't utilize to earn income. The people that literally, I know people who go negative on rentals every month because they're, well, it's storing value. I make more on appreciation and I can afford the negative $300 I kick in on the net losses.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Not anymore. Real estate prices will come down because of this. Also, if we ramp up deportation, real estate prices will come down, right? I hate to be, giving investment advice, but do your homework and do your research. It's a once in a species opportunity. Bitcoin really is the first and only ever scarce asset that is being widely accepted. We literally have a bill in front of Congress that will guarantee your right to self-custody. This is reversing the executive order from 1933, not allowing you, a private citizen, to transact in gold bullion, which at the time, all transactions were peer-to-peer, or you had a local bank or something that held it and it was redeemable. This allows you a shot. Even a little bit will make all the difference in the future. Get off zero. Store your excess energy in Bitcoin and reap the rewards later. Live today like others won't, so tomorrow you can live like others can't. There's one thing that I can help the peasants do. It's this. I'm on the front end of freedom. I've protested the election. I paid the price. I protested the money system and the entire stock market my adult life, in my opinion, to great benefit. I've been debanked. We've been deplatformed. We've seen it all. We've seen it all. And you, the peasants, get a front row seat to watch it. But there are solutions to it. This is one of the key solutions. Like Thomas Jefferson said, take the issuing power of money from the banks and restore it to the people where it rightfully belongs.
And lucky for you guys, you don't have to go through the pain that Taylor did.
Yes. I speak from knowledge and experience. So please do something. All right, guys, we're going to jump over into private and we're going to focus in on Washington State and some of the nonsense that's going on here because we live here and we've got to make a difference. Head on over to politicalremodel.com and takebackmycounty.com and get involved in the political action of going through the arduous process of taking back our local government. We take back our local governments, we take back our states. And we take back our states, the federal government becomes fait accompli. So please get involved. Now is the time to do it. Hiccups. All right. We'll talk to some of you guys in private. Cheat code. If you want to listen to the private, you go listen on audio, Spotify, Apple iTunes or Apple Podcast Player, iHeartRadio, all of them. All the audio podcasts have the Peasant's Perspective, and you can listen to the private over there. And for those of you streaming on YouTube, X, and I don't know if anybody's on Facebook, we'll talk to you.